Okay. So did we finish last time with delayed onset muscle soreness? I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do a quick review. I have a little bit of new material for you today, and then we'll start our review. We talked about, well, do you have any questions to start with for me?
Just as far as the acute muscle soreness on the study guide, it mentions 2 things that can lead to it, and I only remember the lactic acid accumulation.
Fluid going into the muscle is another one that could cause some discomfort, but the main one there is the lactic acid.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so we talked about when someone first starts a resistance training program, they're likely to see increases in strength without hypertrophy, and we talked about 3 neural adaptations that occur to cause that. Sydney, can you explain one of the neural adaptations?
Increased synchronization and recruitment. So since they haven't really developed those, I don't know, pathways or like used those neurons and motor units before, they'll see the those firing and working together, which would lead to that strength gain.
Good. So the coordination of the firing, so that they fire together. Good. London, can you explain another one?
A muscle damage.
That's not one of the neural adaptations to strength training.
Oh.
That's part of the delayed onset muscle soreness.
Sorry.
It's okay. Caroline, do you have one? You need to unmute yourself.
Rate coding, and isn't that sort of like the frequency of firing for the neurons?
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna fire more frequently.
Right, they're able to fire more frequently. Remember that once a neuron depolarizes and sends an action potential, it can't send another action potential until it goes through hyperpolarization and repolarization. So with resistance training, you go through that process faster so that you can send another signal again. Svetlana, can you explain the other one?
I'm gonna pass on this one.
Okay, Olivia, can you explain the other one?
Pass, I'm sorry.
Esmeralda.
Disinhibition, so it's the inhibition of muscle contraction. It desensitizes the Golgi tendon organ, decreasing autogenic inhibition.
Decreasing autogenic inhibition. Good. So the GTO will allow you to produce more force before it starts its inhibition. Good. Make sure you have a good understanding of those and able to explain them back to me. Okay. Happens within the first 8 weeks of resistance training for someone who is new to resistance training, not someone who's switching programs. Okay. If someone has been training for 6 years at 24-hour fitness and they switch to LA Fitness with a new trainer and a new program, it doesn't mean they're starting over at 0 weeks. Okay. This is for a new exerciser. Okay, then we talked about muscle soreness, specifically delayed onset muscle soreness. Oh, we talked about hypertrophy first. So the chronic hypertrophy that comes with regular resistance training, and we said that hypertrophy is due to a combination of 4 things. Eddie, what are those 4 things?
We increase our actin and myosin. We increase our myofibrils. The sarcoplasm increases, and we get bigger connective tissue or stronger, both?
Stronger connective tissue, yeah. Good. And then we talked about delayed onset muscle soreness, and we specifically said it is not due to lactic acid accumulation. We talked about a 4-step process that we go through during the delayed onset muscle soreness. Vanessa, can you list those 4 steps? You don't have to explain them, just list them.
Eccentric overload, muscle damage, inflammatory response, and repair.
Good. So, Jasmine, what is one of the common places for muscle damage?
Would it be near the tendon or
No,
oh,
Brianna?
at the Z disc and the plasmalemma?
Yeah, there you go, the Z
Yeah.
disc and the plasmalemma. So,
Sorry, I was thinking of my other class.
so this is why if you try to go and work out with those same muscles that are sore, you won't be able to produce as much force, because if the Z disc is damaged, the Z disc supports the actin. So if the Z disc is damaged, the sarcomere is unstable, so it's harder to power stroke. Therefore, you can't produce as much force. If the plasmalemma is damaged, plasmalemma is where the acetylcholine needs to bind to propagate the action potential down the T tubes and cause the release of calcium. So if the plasmalemma is damaged, it's not going to propagate the action potential as well. So that's going to interrupt the muscle contraction process as well. So that's not necessarily what you're feeling as pain. That's just what you're feeling as you can't get the same muscle contraction, the same force production out of the muscle. What you're feeling as pain is the inflammatory response. The white blood cells coming in, clearing out the debris is irritating the nerve endings, and that's what you feel as pain. Okay, the repair process rebuilds the muscle to be stronger than it was before. It's part of the hypertrophy process. Okay, questions on any of that? Okay, I want to talk real briefly about immobilization and detraining. So if you, let's say you break your ankle and your leg is in a cast for 3 months, what does that leg look like when it comes out of the cast? A lot smaller, right? So you go through the process of atrophy because you can't contract the muscle when it's immobilized. So that's different from detraining, which is just a decrease or cessation in your regular training program, is different because with detraining, you're still contracting your muscles. You're still doing activities of daily living, which helps you maintain your muscle mass. If the muscle is, if the joint is immobilized, you can't contract the muscle at all. You can maybe do minimal isometric contractions, and that's it. You're going to see a lot of atrophy and significant decreases in strength. So, and it happens almost immediately with the immobilization. So for the first week of immobilization, you get a decrease in strength by about 3 to 4% per day. You lose 3 to 4% of your strength per day for the first week of immobilization. It slows down after that, but it's significant. So the good news is that it's reversible. When you get the cast off and you can start contracting the muscles again, you can rebuild the strength and hypertrophy and get back to where you were. It takes at least as long as the period of immobilization. So if you're immobilized for 3 months, you can expect it to take you at least that long to get back to where you were, and most likely longer. Okay, questions about the immobilization?
Would you mind explaining the difference again between the atrophy and detraining?
So detraining is a decrease in your regular training or a cessation of training. So for example, when we were in school, if you were lifting 3 times a week at the SRC and now you're not lifting at all, or you're doing body weight training instead of the heavy weights, that would be detraining. It's a change or a decrease in your program or a cessation of your program. That would all be considered detraining to different degrees. Okay, so you're not going to see a whole lot of atrophy or losses of strength from that, at least not this quickly. I mean, it would have to be a lot longer to see significant atrophy, because just the activities of daily living will help you maintain a lot of your strength and muscle mass. And if you can even do minimal activities like the body weight exercises twice a week, that's usually good enough to maintain your strength and hypertrophy pretty well. But the first thing that you will lose if you stop training or you decrease your training is your plasma volume. So if you normally run several times a week and you've stopped running, your plasma volume is dropped. So when you go back to start running again, it's going to feel different. Those first couple of runs coming back are going to be really, really hard. Okay, if you think about how the plasma volume is going to affect your performance, those first couple of runs are going to be hard, but you get it back really quickly. Within the first couple of training sessions, of exercise sessions, your plasma volume will go back up. So plasma volume is one of the first adaptations you get when you start doing endurance training. It's also the first adaptation you lose when you stop doing it. You don't really lose the mitochondrial adaptations, the capillary density, the enzymes, the myoglobin. Those adaptations you don't really lose with detraining. Just like the neural adaptations, you don't really lose with detraining unless you stop training for a very, very long time. You generally keep those adaptations, which is why when you start back, you will get back to where you were pretty quickly, because those adaptations will stay with you long term.
Is that what people consider muscle memory, where they say, oh, you have almost muscle memory, you'll get back to it right quick?
Muscle memory has more to do with the technique.
Oh, okay.
Like riding a bike. So like the skill of riding a bike, you'll retain through muscle memory, not necessarily these kind of adaptations. Okay, a real quick mention of exercise-induced muscle cramps. So if you're exercising, running is an easy example, and you get a cramp in your side, couple different things could be causing that. It's usually a lack of oxygen, but that lack of oxygen can be caused by a couple of different things. So back when I used to coach the little kids on the track, so they're running laps around the track and they're constantly pulling up with a cramp. Coach, I have a cramp, I can't run anymore. So the first thing I asked them is, did you just eat right before practice? Because if they just ate a meal and then they're coming to practice and trying to run, they're having competition for blood flow. So they're trying to digest, and so they have vasodilation, increasing blood flow to their digestive tract, and they're trying to run, so they have vasodilation in their lungs, trying to increase blood flow to the lungs. You can't do both at the same time. So you're going to end up with not enough blood flow going to your digestive tract, and that's going to end up in a cramp, a lack of oxygen there. So nothing you can really do about that except stop exercising until you're done digesting. And then I would say next time, don't stop in and out on your way to practice, because you're not going to be able to practice. Okay, you've got to eat farther before, you've got to eat after, so you don't have the competition for blood flow. But that's why there's a whole thing when you're growing up that you can't go swimming for a half hour after you eat. Were you guys always told that as a kid? That's for the same reason, because you don't want to have the competition for blood flow and end up getting a cramp. In the pool, it's dangerous, so everybody focuses on that. But it's really for any type of activity. You really don't want to have activity going on right after you eat, because you'll have that competition. So if the kid says, no, I didn't just eat, then chances are they're not breathing correctly. Maybe their intensity is too high, or they're just not breathing correctly. So I would tell them to decrease their intensity, focus on their breathing until the cramp goes away. Okay, I usually give them a specific time period, or like I say, walk for 20 steps or take 20 deep breaths while you're walking and then start running again. Because with the kids, if I give them the pass to just walk, they'll just walk for the rest of practice. But the cramp should go away pretty quickly, and then they can start again. They might need to go a little bit slower than they were going. They might need to focus on their breathing a little bit more. But usually it's something having to do with that. Or the other thing could be dehydration. And this would tend to happen if we're at a track meet and we're out in the sun all day, and they'll start pulling up with cramps because they're just not drinking enough water or enough electrolytes. So those are the main causes of exercise-induced cramps. If you're getting cramps in your legs in the middle of the night, that's not exercise-induced. That could be electrolyte imbalance, dehydration. It could be an overactive muscle spindle, because you know how the muscle spindle, like during the stretch reflex, when it fires a signal, it can cause a contraction. So it could be spontaneously firing and causing spasms, contractions in the muscle. Okay, questions on any of that? Okay, I want to spend a few minutes talking about weight control and weight loss. It's a little bit outside the scope of this class, but I like to spend time on it because it's important, it's applicable, and I don't think it's really covered in your other classes to the extent that it should be. You guys probably already have people coming to you for advice, and especially after you have a degree in kinesiology, you're gonna have more people coming to you, looking to you as an expert and wanting advice on how do I lose weight. So I wanna make sure you have a good, solid, science-based answer. And there are a lot of different ways to look at it, but in general, weight loss itself is pretty simple because it's calories in versus calories out. That's not saying it's easy. Okay, saying it's a simple scientific concept is much different than saying it's easy. Okay, nobody's saying it's easy, but it is calories in versus calories out. So if you're taking in more calories than you're burning, you're gonna lose weight. If you're burning more calories than you're taking in, wait, did I say that backwards? If you're taking in more calories than you're burning, you're gonna gain weight. If you're burning more calories than you're taking in, you're gonna lose weight. So you work on both sides of the equation to try to get to a balance. And if you're trying to lose weight, you wanna be in a negative calorie balance. Okay, so anybody know how many calories are in a pound of fat?
3,500.
3,500 calories to a pound of fat. So if you can create a 3,500 calorie deficit, say spread it out over the period of a week, you should theoretically lose a pound of fat in that week. Okay, so if you spread out 3,500 calories over a week, that's 500 calories a day. So if you can create a 500 calorie negative balance per day for a week, you should lose a pound. Okay, so if we think about that more specifically, what does 500 calories a day look like? So first of all, let me say that when I was a grad student, I taught some of the activity classes, and I had them do food logs. And I was shocked. I was blown away by what these students were eating. Now, granted, most of them were not kinesiology students, and I've done it since with kinesiology students, and it's not as bad. But these students, not just eating fast food every day, 90%, 95% of them were eating fast food every day, but I'd say most of those people were eating at every meal. So if I were to go to these people and say, no more fast food, your goal is to lose weight, you can't have any more fast food. That could be an effective way for them to lose weight. Is it realistic for them? Absolutely not. They might be able to stick to it for a day or two, but that's their habit. They don't know any better. They're not going to be able to maintain my restriction. Okay, so when you're trying to make changes, it's important that the changes you make are small so that they're realistic. Okay, so a person who's trying to lose weight can go on a strict diet, okay, that's going to massively restrict their calories and cause them to lose a lot of weight really quickly, and that's effective. The problem is those strict diets are not designed to be long-term. They're designed to be short-term. So you lose a lot of weight really quickly, and then you go off the diet, and then you go back to your old habits, and then you gain the weight back. Okay, so although it's effective in the short term, it's not effective in the long term. So if I tell you to completely change your habits, through discipline, you can maybe maintain that for a short period of time, but it's not going to be something you can sustain. Okay, so the changes have to be small and realistic. So I'm not going to tell you you can't drink soda anymore if you're used to having sodas with every meal. If I tell you you can't drink soda anymore, it's not sustainable, it's not realistic for you. That could be the eventual end goal, but it can't be sudden like that. It's got to be gradual. Okay, so if I say, okay, on this day, you're going to get a small soda instead of a large soda. Okay, you can still go to Burger King, whatever you're doing for lunch, just get a small soda instead of a large soda. Okay, and if you think about a can of soda, I think, is about 250 calories. Okay, if you're getting a soda at a restaurant, it's much bigger than that. And if you're getting a large, it's much bigger than that. And if you're getting refills, that's a lot. Okay, so I'm not asking you to not get it. I'm just asking you decrease, get it small and don't get a refill. Okay, guarantee that's going to save you a minimum of 250 calories. Okay, from that. So we're trying to get a 500 calorie deficit. That's going to be 250 calories right there on the, is it 150 or 250 in a can of soda?
It's like 150.
I think it's 150. It might be 150. So say, let's say you save 150 calories by getting the small soda instead of the large, although I think you will save more than that. Let's say on this day, you skip the Snickers bar that you normally have in between lunch and dinner. Okay, let's say that's another 150 calories. Let's say, what else can we do here? Let's say you go for a brisk walk. That's another 150 calories. Okay, and let's say you, what else can we do here? Don't get a second serving of mashed potatoes with your dinner. Okay, we only need 50 more calories, right? We're at 350. Wait, are we at 300? Okay, so let's just say we save 500 calories by 50 calories by not getting a second serving of mashed potatoes. Okay, this is a 500 calorie deficit for this day. We've made small, realistic changes. I didn't deprive you of anything. Okay, the next day, if we do more exercise, get a 300 calorie deficit from exercise, we don't have to make as many changes to our intake. Okay, so small changes, it's not that hard to get to a 500 calorie deficit. You can change what you do every day. The days you exercise more, you don't have to make as many changes to your food. The days you don't exercise, you have to make a couple more small changes. You do that over the course of a week, end up with a 3,500 calorie deficit. Theoretically, that would be a pound of weight loss, pound of fat. So losing a pound per week is reasonable weight loss. If you want to lose 2 pounds per week, you got to double that. You got to have a 1,000 calorie deficit, which becomes harder to do. And also, then you get into the issue of getting dangerously close to your basal metabolic rate. Remember, we talked about basal metabolic rate. If your intake is less than your basal metabolic rate, that's starvation. And in starvation mode, your body will hold on to its fat stores and instead break down muscle for energy, which is not what you want when you're losing weight. So there's kind of a trick there. You have to be eating enough to let your fat metabolism work appropriately, but also be in a caloric deficit to be losing fat. So it's really helpful to understand approximately where the basal metabolic rate is and make sure the person doesn't go underneath those calories, okay? But what that means is if someone is losing more than 2 pounds per week, they're probably not losing fat. Not losing more than 2 pounds a week from fat. The other weight they're losing is probably coming from muscle. If they're on a severely restricted caloric intake, they're definitely going to lose weight, but a lot of the weight is going to be coming from muscle. Because if you're that far restricted, your fat metabolism is going to shut down or slow down. Okay, so although people want to lose a lot of weight very quickly, that's not the healthiest way to do it, because what they really want to do is lose fat, not lose muscle. So losing weight is kind of the wrong way to look at it. It's not necessarily the numbers on the scale that we're concerned about. It's the body composition. We want to be maintaining or building muscle while losing fat. That's a slower process. That makes sense? But people will spend millions and millions of dollars on these diet programs that will cause them to lose weight, a lot of weight quickly. And they work. Anything that restricts your calories is going to work. So keto can work, paleo can work, Atkins can work, intermittent fasting can work, the Malibu diet can work, the Fleck diet can work, whatever diet that's the current fad can work because it's restricting your calories. but they're so severe that first of all, you're losing weight too quickly. You're probably losing muscle. Second of all, it's not sustainable because it's too severe. So you end up going back to your old habits and gaining the weight back. Okay, so I mean, I can write a book and come up with a cute diet and sell it and cause people to lose weight and make a ton of money off of it, and then, you know, not care what happens to them. I already got money from them, and they can go back to their old habits and gain weight because I've got plenty of other people coming in to buy my program, and it's fine. Okay, keep in mind that nutrition is separate from weight loss. Okay, so you can be on any kind of diet that cuts out all kinds of food groups. You can cut out this food group and cut out that food group and not eat any of this and severely restrict your calories, and that's not looking at nutrition. Okay, so I'm specifically talking about weight loss here, nutrition as a totally separate topic. Okay, they should be combined, but right now I'm talking about them separately. Do you have questions before I give a more specific example? Okay, so let's say this woman comes to me to hire me as a trainer. She weighs 250 pounds and she's 25% fat. Okay, she comes to me and she says, oh, my daughter's getting married in a month and I want to fit into this dress. I need to lose a lot of weight really quickly. Can you help me? And I'll say, of course I can help you. It's my job. Because I have a sign at the end of the freeway off-ramp that says, lose 50 pounds this month. Ask me how, and my phone number. You guys seen all those signs? So I have a program that will work. So if she calls me, I'm going to charge her $1,000. I'm going to put her on my program. And she told me she loves steak. So I said, okay, I'm going to put you on a steak diet. You can have steak for breakfast, steak for lunch, steak for dinner, as long as you don't eat more than, let's say, 800 calories in a day. Okay, that's not a whole lot of steak. But that's not the point. I got a steak diet. Steak is awesome. So she's going to go on this diet. Is she going to lose weight? Is she going to lose weight?
Yes, she will.
Absolutely. She's eating 800 calories a day. I guarantee you she's going to lose weight. So she's going to get down to 200 pounds very quickly. She's going to fit into the dress. She's going to have a great time at the wedding. Is she going to stay on my program?
No. No.
No. First of all, she doesn't want to pay me anymore. Second of all, she doesn't want to eat another steak in her life. Is she going to stay at 200 pounds?
No.
No. She's going to gain the weight back. I didn't teach her anything. She's going to go back to her old habits. She's going to gain the weight back. Okay, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt here and stop her at 250 pounds where she was. But I will tell you, most of the time when people do this, they go back to a higher weight than where they started. They gain more weight than they lost. Okay, but I'm going to stop her at 250 pounds. When she lost all this weight very quickly, was it mostly fat?
No.
No, if you're losing weight that quickly, 800 calories a day, starvation. So a lot of the weight that she lost was muscle. When she gained this weight back, was she gaining muscle?
No.
Absolutely not. So now she's at 30% fat. She lost muscle and gained fat. Okay, so she's going to hire me again. You helped me last time. Can you help me again? Of course I can. This time I'm going to charge you $2,000. And you don't want steak, so I'm going to put you on an ice cream diet. You can have ice cream, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, as long as you don't eat over 800 calories a day. She can lose weight on that?
Yes.
It does not matter that it's ice cream. It does not matter where the calories are coming from. If it's rice, if it's bread, if it's steak, if it's ice cream, if it's salad, it makes no difference. All that matters is the intake of calorie balance. Okay, nutrition is separate. Okay, I'm talking about weight loss here. If you're eating significantly less calories than you're burning, you are going to lose weight. Okay, so she's going to lose weight. She's going to fire me again because she can't afford it and because she doesn't want to eat any more ice cream. Is she going to stay at 200 pounds?
No.
No, I didn't teach her anything. She's going to go back to her old habits. Okay, let's stop her at 250 where she was, even though she's likely to go higher. Okay, when she lost weight, what did she mainly lose?
Muscle.
Muscle, because she was on a severely restricted diet. She was in starvation mode that whole time. Lost a lot of muscle. When she gained it back, most likely she gained fat. So now she's at 35% fat.
Oh my God.
Okay, she can hire me again if she wants to. And she can say, can you put me on something healthier? Last couple times you gave me steak and ice cream and I really, I feel like that's really unhealthy. Can you put me on something healthier? I'll say, okay, I'll put you on a carrot diet. Carrots are healthy and you can eat a lot of carrots for 800 calories a day. You can be eating carrots all day long and probably still not hit 800 calories. So you're gonna lose weight?
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes no difference where the 800 calories is coming from. None whatsoever. And it can be anything. The point is she's going to lose a lot of weight very quickly and a lot of it's going to be muscle. Okay? So instead, she's going to get a little smarter. It doesn't matter to me because I'm going to have a line of people waiting for my program because my program is highly effective, is it not? My program works great. You can't argue with that. My program works great. It does exactly what I said it was going to do. Okay, but she's going to get smarter and she's going to hire you instead. And you're a better trainer than I am. So you're going to say, okay, I can help you, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work. We're going to make small, gradual changes and we're going to change your habits and we're going to change your lifestyle. So maybe I will take you to the grocery store, show you how to pick out some fresh produce instead of all the processed foods, or show you how to read labels and make better choices of your processed foods. I'm going to bring that stuff home and show you how to cook a few meals so you don't go out to fast food for every meal. Maybe you're going to go through your cabinets and help you clear out some of the processed foods and help you read the labels, make some choices. I'm going to have you do a food log and make some small, gradual changes in that food log. I'm not going to say no more of this, no more of this. I'm not going to cut anything out. I'm just going to make gradual changes. Have you guys ever done a food log before? It's a really interesting experience if you haven't. And I have when I teach 336, I have my students do this. It's important to realize that when you do a food log, just doing a food log will affect your eating habits. Because just the fact that you have to write everything down and be accountable for it, be aware of it, and someone else is probably going to see it, it makes you make different choices. So if you have someone do a food log that you're going to make your changes based on, you cannot make big changes because even the small changes that you suggest on there are going to be in addition to the small changes they already made when they were creating that food log. So you've got to keep that in mind and be realistic. Make small change. Like I said, maybe you can still go to Burger King, but maybe don't get cheese on the burger or don't get double cheese, or, you know, small changes. You can still get fries, but get a small one instead of a large one. You know, so the person's not totally restricted. These are things that are doable and sustainable, okay? And they can progress, okay? And you're gonna start them on an exercise program, okay? So this person is also going to lose weight. It's gonna be slower, maybe a pound a week, maybe 2 pounds a week. It's gonna take time, okay? So going back to this drawing, instead of this up and down, so this up and down like this is called yo-yo dieting. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are so many programs out there that can cause this rapid weight loss, but none of them are designed to be sustainable. They're designed to give you the rapid weight loss, okay? People are making a ton of money off of that. But you, instead, are going to give her the more reasonable weight loss. So anyway, before I go on there, she would have been better off staying where she started, right? At the end of this yo-yo dieting, and people will go through this many more cycles, she's so much worse off. Even though her weight on the scale is the same and she doesn't realize anything's different, This is the underlying cause of so many issues, right? The risk factors for so many other problems. She would have been much better just staying where she was originally, okay? But if she hires you, she's gonna have a long, slow process of weight loss. She'll eventually get there, but this is what fat loss looks like. It's long and it's slow. She can eventually get there. Okay, she'll get down to the same place she could have on the other programs, but now she has lifestyle changes that she can maintain. This is now sustainable. She's not severely restricting herself. She's still able to go do what she wants to do. She just makes some smarter choices. Okay, that overall impact this long-term lifestyle. And if she's doing this, chances are it's affecting her family. And her family has changed their lifestyle and is becoming more healthy. So you go in and you make adjustments to individuals, that affects families, then it affects communities, and then you're having a real impact on the community rather than just taking people one by one, profiting off of them, and then not caring what happens to them, which is what most of the diet industry does. Okay, so she can maintain this if she wants to. She can choose to take it down lower because she knows how to make small changes in her intake. She knows how to do the exercise. She's developed these lifestyle habits. Okay, so you know, you could make a lot of money off of selling any fad diet you want, or you could come up with your own and write a book on it, and you know, you have a degree to back it up and it's effective, but keep in mind what's healthier. Not necessarily just what's effective, because things can be effective but not necessarily healthy. Okay, does that make sense? Do you have questions for me on that?
Have you heard of If It Fits Your Macros, and is that the same kind of concept?
I have not heard of that specifically.
All right.
What about like, do you know those like tea detoxes or like detoxes that people do? Like, would that be like the same thing sort of as like the yo-yo dieting?
So, I mean, the idea behind a detox is like to severely limit your intake for a short period of time to like clean out the toxins out of your body. But the research does not support that does anything significant. Although if it makes you feel better, then that's something real. You know, if you take a week to do a detox, there might not be anything really physiological happening to like clean you out, as what people think. But if you feel like it does, and it kind of kickstarts your motivation to have better habits afterwards, that's real. You know what I mean? So you can't discount that. But the detox programs themselves physiologically don't have that much effect according to the research. Okay, any other questions on that topic?
I sort of have another one.
Go ahead.
So my family has like a Diet Coke obsession where like they just drink a ton of Diet Coke, and it's like there's like, oh, it's 0 calories, so you know it's not like bad for you, but what it could be like, because they're like they don't know why it's bad for them. So I'm like, and I honestly don't know, because I'm like, it does say, but I know it's like not good for you. So do you know what I could like tell them?
I do. So a couple things here. The first one is the chemical sweeteners. So chemical sweeteners, depending on the chemical sweetener that's in the soda, some chemical sweeteners are carcinogenic. So better to have the real sugar, which is a natural product, than to have the chemical, which is carcinogenic. The other issue with the diet sodas is that the research has shown that it tricks your brain so that it makes you think that you've got the calories, but then it doesn't actually have the calories, and it makes you crave the calories more. So people who drink diet soda tend to end up consuming more total calories because they end up eating more sugar to accommodate for that. And there's a lot of research on that you could look up and show them if that helps them believe you at all. Okay, so that is it for new information. We're going to do some reviewing I asked you to fill out this table, right, for the energy systems. So
Yes.
hopefully you put some time into that, because I don't have time to go over the whole thing and fill it out with you. I want to go over a couple things to make sure you have them, and then I'll take questions if there's any specific part of it that stumped you. I want to go over major reactions in the ATP PCR system. Did you guys figure out what those were?
Is it the ones that involve creatine kinase?
Yeah, well, it's all of those reactions. So we can start out with the breakdown of ATP. Right, and then what is this energy used for?
Electron transport chain?
Nope.
No.
What is this energy used for?
The myosin head going back to 90 degrees.
It's the myosin head back to 90 degrees. Remember, in the muscle contraction cycle, ATP binds to the myosin head, releases it from the actin. We break down the ATP, release energy, bring it back up to 90 degrees so it can bind to the next site. Okay, so this is where we're using ATP for muscle contraction, specifically in bringing it back up to 90 degrees. Okay, then in this system, we break down the PCR. To release energy. And what is this energy used for?
To rebuild the ATP.
To rebuild the ATP, which is just taking these broken pieces, creating ATP, right? So this energy gets used here. And this reaction is called what?
Phosphorylation.
Phosphorylation. Then we have this other reaction for rebuilding ATP. And this was important because this AMP, the adenosine monophosphate, is one of our triggers for PFK. That speeds up glycolysis. That relates to how high intensity exercise creates lactic acid. And then we had the recovery reaction. Okay, where is this energy coming from?
From the electron transport chain?
From the electron transport chain in the mitochondria, which is why this reaction takes so long to rebuild all the PCR. How long does it take to rebuild all the PCR?
3 to 5
3 to 5 minutes.
About 3 to 5 minutes. Good. What's the enzyme for this breakdown of ATP reaction?
ATPase.
ATPase. What's the reaction for, what's the enzyme for breaking down the PCR?
Creatine kinase.
Okay, what's the enzyme for rebuilding the ATP?
ATP synthase.
The reaction for the enzyme for the ADP reaction?
Myokinase.
Myokinase. And then the one for the rebuilding of the PCR?
Creatine kinase.
Creatine kinase. And what is the rate limiting enzyme for all these, for this whole process?
Creatine kinase.
Creatine kinase. Good. So that goes in the major reactions under ATP PCR. Major reaction under glycolysis. What's the major reaction for glycolysis?
Would it be from G6P to pyruvate?
Yep.
Using the phosphofructokinase?
Yep. Yeah, so remember G6P is the beginning of glycolysis, 2-pyruvate is the end of glycolysis. So there are a lot of reactions happening in here, but we didn't cover those. So for us, it's G6P to 2-pyruvate. Enzyme for that is PFK. Okay, for the aerobic section incorporates beta oxidation, Krebs, and the electron transport chain. Okay, all those reactions are lumped together because they're aerobic. Most of their answers in all these boxes will be the same. There'll be a couple of differences. Beta oxidation, we didn't go into the details of the reactions within beta oxidation. We just said that that's the separation of a pair of carbons from the chain. Krebs cycle, we also didn't go into a lot of details on the reactions within the Krebs cycle. You'll get that in 446. But electron transport chain, we did. We talked about the redox reactions. So does someone want to explain in detail what the redox reactions are and why they're important?
So the redox reactions are the reduction and oxidation. So when you gain a hydrogen, it is being reduced.
It's not the hydrogen, it's the electron.
Oh, when you get an electron, it's being reduced, and then when you lose the electron, it's being oxidative.
Oxidized.
Oxidized.
What's being reduced and oxidized?
Is it the NADH?
The NADH is being reduced and oxidized, but that's not the important part of the redox reactions.
It's the cytochromes.
Cytochromes in the electron transport chain are being reduced and oxidized as they pass the electron. What is the purpose of this?
To make energy to create, to make the ATP?
Right, for oxidative phosphorylation, rebuilding of the ATP, enzyme for that?
ATPase, amino
ATP
synthase.
synthase. Okay, the enzyme for the redox reactions?
Cytochrome oxidase.
Cytochrome oxidase. Okay, so go back and review the redox reactions if you don't remember that. Okay, so you should be able to give examples of training for each of these systems and be able to identify examples of so if I give you an example of training, you should be able to identify which system it's in. That goes along with the adaptations from the training. And I said that you should work on thinking about how training in one system would affect performance in the different systems. And now we've got to add resistance training to that. How is resistance training going to affect performance in ATP PCR, performance in glycolysis, performance in the aerobic system? So I'm not going to ask you, how does training in glycolysis affect performance in ATP PCR? I might say something like, this person is doing 10-second sprint repeats with 20 seconds rest in between. How is that going to affect their 100-meter sprint time? Okay, so in order to answer that, you need to know what system they're working in, what the adaptations are for that, and what system they're performing in, and how those adaptations are going to affect that performance. Okay, so those two questions were exactly the same, except one I used more applied situation to ask you the question. Did you follow that? Okay, so make sure you can identify what system something is in. Review your causes of fatigue in each system. And so again, if I give you an example, I could use that same example. The person is doing 10-second sprint repeats with 20 seconds of rest in between. I could ask you, what are the causes of their fatigue? In order to answer that, you need to know what system they're in, right? And be able to list and explain in detail the causes of fatigue there. ATP count. In the ATP PCR system, we didn't do an ATP count, so you don't need a number there. For anaerobic glycolysis, what would be the ATP count?
32.
Not if we're just talking about anaerobic glycolysis.
2 ATP.
2 if you're coming from?
Glucose.
Glucose. And what if you're coming from muscle glycogen? 3. So that's here. Right? If we're counting ATP, you have -1 coming in from glucose. You have the investment phase of glycolysis, and then you produce 4. So coming from glucose, you'd end up with 2. Coming from muscle glycogen, you'd end up with 3. If I'm only talking about anaerobically produced ATP, you can't count the ones from the electron transport chain. Okay, that would be if we're doing complete oxidation, counting the aerobic side. Okay, so if we look at the aerobic side, in the aerobic category, we're gonna have a different ATP count if we're using carbohydrates or if we're using fat. Okay, so for aerobic metabolism, what's the ATP count if we're using carbohydrates?
Doesn't it depend
On what?
on the carbon chain, like the length of the carbon chain?
Not for carbohydrates.
In this case, would we not include the ATP gained from anaerobic glycolysis?
You would,
You
because
would?
if you're going through glycolysis, you're going to produce those.
So then wouldn't it be just 32 from glucose and 33 from glycogen?
Yeah, 32 if you're coming from glucose, 33 if you're coming from muscle glycogen. Those are numbers you should know. Okay, but go back and review where those are coming from. Your NADs and your FADs.
Can you repeat that question again? Because I'm a little confused.
That was for the ATP count in aerobic metabolism. So I'm specifically asking about carbohydrates. The ATP count from the aerobic metabolism of carbohydrates. So the thing is, the previous question of the ATP for the anaerobic metabolism of carbohydrates is a bad question because you'll never have the anaerobic part of it without the aerobic. Right? Because we're going to be aerobic as long as we can, and then we'll overflow into the anaerobic. So you're never going to have the anaerobic ATP without the aerobic ATP. So that's kind of a theoretical question, not an actual realistic question. So I don't really like that question, but I still want you to be able to think about them separately.
So for the chart, since it's anaerobic, it's still
Anaerobic
2 and 3?
It's 2 or 3, but yeah, that'll never happen.
Gotcha.
Without the other ones happening.
So where would we put the, like the 32 and the 33?
Okay, so the 32 and 33 is under the aerobic column, where we have the aerobic systems in ATP count. You need to separate it into carbohydrate and fat. So carbohydrate's going to be 32 or 33. What would we put for fat for ATP count?
It would depend on the number of on the length of the carbon chain.
That's where it depends on the length of the carbon chain with the fat. So the longer the carbon chain, the more ATP you'll get, because each pair of carbons is going to add a pass through beta oxidation and a pass through Krebs. Right? So you can go back and review how to count ATP from a free fatty acid. Okay. Adaptations from training. What are the adaptations from training in the ATP PCR system?
Hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy is the primary adaptation. What's secondary?
Strength, speed, and power.
Strength, speed, and power. And keep in mind that training in the ATP PCR system can be high intensity interval training like sprinting. It can also be heavy resistance training. Those can both be done in the ATP PCR system. Training in glycolysis, what are the primary adaptations?
Hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy.
Increased strength.
The strength, speed, and power secondary to that. What are the other primary adaptations?
Increased bicarbonate buffer and increased glycolytic enzymes.
Good. And then what's secondary to the bicarbonate buffer?
Increased lactate threshold.
Lactate threshold. Good. In the endurance system, adaptations to training.
Increased mitochondria, increased capillary density, increased myoglobin, and increase in O2 enzymes.
Are these our only adaptations to endurance training?
I think there's a secondary one
There are more primary ones.
or more primary.
Increased left ventricular hypertrophy. Increased plasma volume. Increased red blood cells. Increased arterial autoregulation. And increased left ventricular internal diameter.
Mhm. Remember we talked about 9 primary adaptations to endurance training. So I know that if I say list 9 adaptations from endurance training, that trigger of me saying list 9 adaptations brings up that list of 9 things. Okay, but you need to understand this is where this fits. Okay, now we have a list of adaptations for training ATP-PCR, we have a list of adaptations for training glycolysis, and we have a list of adaptations for training endurance. That's where those go. Okay, what are the secondary adaptations that go along with these?
Decreased resistance.
Okay, from what?
From increased arterial autoregulation.
Okay.
Increased VO2 max.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Increased VO2 max.
Okay, from what?
The increase in myoglobin, mitochondria, O2 enzymes, and capillary densities.
Just those 4?
And arterial autoregulation, RBC, and plasma.
All of these contribute to increased VO2 max, right? Some of them will contribute through increased AVO2 difference. And some of them will contribute through, increased AVO2 difference also includes plasma, red blood cells, arterial autoregulation. If we organized it better, those would have all been together. Some of them will cause increases in stroke volume, which will also cause increases in cardiac output, right? Those are all secondary adaptations. There's another main one. There are a bunch of small ones we could put on here. There's one more main one that we're missing.
Is it increased total blood volume?
Okay, we could put that. What's that due to?
Increased plasma volume and increased red blood cells.
Okay, so plasma and red blood cells are going to cause an increase in total blood volume. Okay, that's not the major one I'm looking for, but that's fine.
Did someone already say lactate threshold?
Lactate threshold due to which ones?
The first 4.
So remember that an increase in lactate threshold also comes from endurance training, right? And you should be able to explain how these adaptations, specifically the mitochondria is the most important one here, causes an increase in lactate threshold. Okay, so you need to consider that when you are thinking about how endurance training is going to affect performance in the other systems. Okay, is endurance training going to affect 100-meter sprint? Is it going to affect 400-meter sprint? Is it going to affect 1 rep max? Is it going to affect 5-mile run? Okay, not just thinking about the primary adaptations, but thinking about how the secondary adaptations may or may not affect performance in those different areas. Okay, let's do this. We have ATP PCR system. We have glycolysis, and we have electron transport chain, beta oxidation, which are our aerobic systems. Okay, so we can draw a clear line here because these 2 systems are anaerobic and these systems are rubric. Okay, so my question is, what determines between the aerobic systems and the anaerobic systems, what determines whether we're working aerobically or anaerobically?
Your lactate threshold. Here before it or after.
And what determines that?
Your intensity.
Your intensity. Your intensity is going to determine whether you're working aerobically or anaerobically, right? Remember, at the lower intensities, we're working aerobically. At the higher intensities, we're working anaerobically. Why do we work anaerobically at the higher intensities?
Because of decreased mitochondrial availability.
Decreased mitochondrial availability. Okay, so that forces us to create lactic acid, relying on the anaerobic systems. Why else? I know we've covered this several times. Why do we work anaerobically at high intensities?
Because we're using carbs.
Okay, why are we using carbs at high intensity?
Because your anaerobic, like your type 2A and your type 2X, they can't rely on fat. They can only rely on.
Exactly. So as you increase your intensity, you have to recruit your fast twitch fibers. Fast twitch fibers don't have a lot of mitochondria. Fast twitch fibers work anaerobically. So we have to rely on carbohydrates because we can't use fat anaerobically. Okay, so this relates to the production of lactic acid, like Eddie says. It relates to the crossover concept. It relates to the RER. Okay, a lot of different topics you could integrate here. You need to be able to discuss these things with an understanding of how all those concepts integrate. Okay, not just listing one and listing the other because you've memorized it and not understand how these things interact. Okay, so intensity is going to determine whether you're working aerobically or anaerobically, and you should be able to explain why. Okay, if we're working anaerobically we have two different systems. Between these two anaerobic systems, what determines which system you'll be in?
The length of your workout.
Okay, so if it's duration, then that means if I walk to my kitchen and back and it takes me 10 seconds, I'm in the ATP PCR system because I'm 10 seconds and under. Is that true?
No. You have to be using your type 2X fibers.
Which means I have to be at what intensity?
Highest.
Very high maximal intensity. So it's not the duration that determines which system you're in. It's the intensity. Okay, in order to access my ATP PCR system, I have to access my 2X fibers, which means I have to be maximal or near maximal intensity. Okay, so for example, if my top speed in my sprint is 15 miles per hour, I can hold that top speed for about 10 seconds before I run out of PCR. So 15 miles per hour is my top speed. 12 miles per hour is still a sprint, but that's a speed I can hold for a minute, and I can do a whole lap at 12 miles per hour. If I run at 12 miles per hour for 10 seconds, am I in my ATP PCR system? Because I stopped at 10 seconds.
No.
No. If I can run 15 miles per hour for 10 seconds, running 12 miles per hour for 10 seconds is not near maximal. So just because I'm stopping at 10 seconds doesn't mean I'm in the ATP PCR system. The duration does not determine which system I'm in. The intensity does. That intensity is not close enough to my max to put me into the ATP PCR system. Okay, if we look at it in terms of weightlifting, if I can press 200 pounds 3 times, I can press 100 pounds probably 20 times. But I put 100 pounds there and I press it 3 times and I stop. Am I training my ATP PCR system because I'm doing 3 reps? No, I chose to stop at 3 reps. I didn't fail at 3 reps. There's a difference. Okay, if you're choosing to stop at 3 reps, you're not training, you're not doing anything. You're just choosing to stop at 3 reps. If you're failing at 3 reps, you're in the ATP PCR system. Okay, so if you're lifting a weight that you could do 20 reps of, that's not high intensity. Just because you're stopping at 3 doesn't make it high intensity. So when I say 3 reps, I assume it's 3 reps max. When I say 10 reps, the assumption is it's 10 reps max. You can't do another one. Okay, so if you could run at 12 miles per hour for a minute, but you're only doing it for 10 seconds, you're not in the ATP PCR system. So don't be fooled by the duration. Okay, so if I gave you that as an example, and I said, Cindy's top speed is 15 miles per hour. She's running at 12 miles per hour for 10 seconds and doing repeats of that. She's got 3 minutes of rest in between, and she's sprinting at 12 miles per hour. Is she sprinting in the ATP PCR system? She's not. Just because it's 10 seconds of work followed by three minutes of recovery doesn't mean it's ATP PCR system. What if I had her walking? She's gonna walk for 10 seconds, then she's gonna sit for 3 minutes, and then she's gonna walk for 10 seconds, and then she's gonna sit for 3 minutes. Is she training in the ATP PCR system? No, not just because it's 10 seconds doesn't mean it's in that system. It has to be high maximal near maximal intensity. Does that make sense? So it's intensity that determines which system you're in. The system that you're in will determine the duration. Okay, so if you're exercising in the ATP PCR system, you cannot stay in that system for longer than about 10 seconds. So the duration you're staying there does not determine the system you're in. The system you're in determines how long you can stay there. Okay, that's an important distinction. Do you have questions on that? Okay. So what I'm going to do is we have one more class that we're meeting before your final. I'm going to spend that class talking about some more applications and pointing out what you should focus on from the older material and how to integrate it with the newer material. But I want to right now give you some applied questions to think about for when you come in on Wednesday. First thing I want you to think about is if a person comes to you and says their goal is to lose weight, should they walk so they stay at a lower intensity in the fat burning zone, or should they run? Let's say they have 30 minutes to work out. Should they walk and stay in a fat burning zone, or should they run? I want you to give me a physiological explanation for which one you tell them to do and why. Okay, I don't want you to answer that right now. I want you to think about it.
Assuming they have healthy knees.
Assuming they have healthy knees. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay. Now I'm going to draw something for you that I want you to interpret. This time. The first line that I'm drawing is oxygen requirement. Second line that I'm drawing is oxygen consumption. Okay, I want you to explain this to me. Give me an example of what a person could be doing that would cause this, and what's happening between their consumption and their requirement. Describe it to me using some terms that we've learned. Okay, I'll leave this on here for a second so you can copy it. The red line is oxygen requirement, the blue line is oxygen consumption. The third thing I want you to think about is to pick a sport. Volleyball, soccer, basketball, baseball, and be able to talk about what metabolic systems they're using during that sport. Okay, so 3 applied questions I want you to think about between now and then. And we're also going to talk about the questions at the bottom of your study guide. So put some thought into those as well. Okay, your final, I believe, is Monday, next Monday. I don't remember what time, 12 something, I think.
Can you repeat the question for the graph?
Yeah, I want you to explain what's happening here. Give me an example of what kind of thing they might be doing, and explain to me what's happening in relation to their consumption and requirement, and use some terminology.
What was
Okay.
the last question?
What, Esmeralda?
What was the last question?
The last question was to pick a sport and talk about what metabolic system or systems are used in that sport and explain how and why. I usually use volleyball as an example, but then I always get students coming to me saying they know nothing about volleyball. So I'm just gonna let you pick any sport. Volleyball is just my preference. All right, so I'll stick around for a couple minutes right now if you have a question for me. Otherwise, please spend some time on this between now and Wednesday, and I will see you then.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question about the fiber types, the last part of the chart that we filled out.
Yes.
So I guess I was just making sure, like, it doesn't stick to like ATP PCR is just 2x, or I wasn't sure about that.
Well, it does. That's the main thing I'm asking here. Is that if you're training the ATP PCR system, your focus is on activating the 2x fibers. That doesn't mean the other fibers aren't being activated, because they are. You can't activate the 2x without activating the type 1. But that system is focusing on using the 2A fibers. And the aerobic systems are focused on using the type 1 fibers.
Oh, I think I got you.
But they're gonna the ATP PCR system, when you're working the 2x fibers, you're gonna be activating all 3 fiber types.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Hey, Professor, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you going to, by any chance, reopen up the quizzes in case we missed any?
I am, yes. I will reopen the quizzes for you. Absolutely.
Okay, they will be through the day of the exam?
Yeah, I'll open them up for the whole, till next week.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question about the weight loss thing. So you said that, if you have too much of a calorie deficit, you lose muscle, and I understand that. What does that do to strength? Because I've known people on keto that don't lose their strength ability. They still keep continuing to lift weights, and their strength, increases at a normal rate. So
if they're doing resistance training through this process, they're less likely to lose as much muscle. It'll be really hard for them to gain at a significant caloric deficit. But yeah, weight training will definitely help minimize the losses.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Nick, yes. 2A, yeah, type 1 and 2A for glycolysis.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, thank you.
So, how was I saying that? So for maximum duration in anaerobic glycolysis, it would still remain in like seconds, right? Maybe like 30 to 40 seconds max.
No, if you're just barely above your lactate threshold, you can stay there for several minutes.
So
a mile run done at a maximum speed that can be held for a mile, the perfect mile, can be mostly anaerobic. And that can be like 4 to 5 minutes.
So for maximum duration in anaerobic glycolysis, would it be like the longest time you can remain above your slightly above your lactate.
Yeah, so there's a wide range for that one. We said depending on how far above your lactate threshold you are. If you're just barely above, it can be several minutes. If you're way above, it can be 10 seconds before you fatigue, and anything in between. So usually the number that's put on there, if you want to put a number on it, it's 2 minutes. But yeah, there is a wide variety for that. Any other questions, guys?
I think I'm good. Thanks for.
All right, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.